Hello friends, this is Shubham and today I will be talking about the RH blood group system. In my previous video I have already discussed about the ABO blood group system, and in this video I will talk about RH blood group system. Actually there are more than 50 kinds of RH antigens, but among them there are 5 or 6, you can say, most common antigens. So I will talk about them. So actually in ancient times our scientists take the blood, or you can say RBCs, from the rhesus monkey. For example, this is this is the monkey, and this is for example some experimental animal like guinea pig, or for example rabbit. So what the scientists did, that they took the RBCs from rhesus monkey and they injected into this animal. Now this is the rhesus monkey, and this is for example guinea pig. So they took the RBCs from the rhesus monkey and they injected into the experimental animal, that is guinea pig. And what they observed, that these experimental animals, they were able to make the antisera against it. They were able to make the antisera against this RH antigen. So in response to the rhesus antigen, they were able to make, in fact all the experimental animals were able to make the antisera against these kinds of RH antigens. So almost 100% of these animals were able to make the antisera against these antigens. And when the scientists injected these RBCs into the human, when these same RBCs were injected into the human, then almost 85% of the population, almost 85% of the human population were able to make antisera against it. Means they were able to make the antibodies against these disease antigens, while 15% of human population were not able to do so. So what they observed, that our 85% of population, 85% of population are able to make the antisera against these kind of RH antigens, while the 15% of population are not able to make the antisera against these RH antigens, which shows that some people are RH positive, means that they can react to the rhesus antigen, and while some of the population, however, which is very rare, almost 15% or less than 15%, are not able to make the antibodies against it, so which means those people are RH negative. And if we talk about the population, that which population in the world are most susceptible to the RH antigens, so let's talk about here. Almost African white population, they are 85% susceptible to these RH antigens. And African black population, they were 100% susceptible to the RH antigens, which means almost all of them were able to make the antibodies against these RH antigens. And sorry, this was the American white people. And if we talk about American blacks population, about 95% of them were able to make the antibodies against these RH antigens. And Asian populations, about 99% of them are able to make the antibodies, which means almost all of them were able to make RH antigens, antibodies against these RH antigens. So now this was about the percentage of the population, that how many people are susceptible to these RH antigens. Why we are calling it as RH antigen? Because it was taken from the rhesus monkey, so that's why these antigens are named as RH antigens. Okay. Now let's talk about these antigens in details. That what does these people like RH positive or RH negative, what they really mean. Now, mainly, as I have already mentioned, that there are more than 50 RH antigens, but among them there are few some common RH antigens, which are D antigen, C antigen, capital C or small c, or capital E or small e antigen. Actually, in some books you may come across with the term small d also, but small d is just simply means that there is no capital D, or that means those persons are simply RH negative. Okay. Now, among these 5 RH antigens, if you ask about the most common one or most prevalent one, that one will be the D RH antigen. And actually, if we are calling any person, that if any particular person is RH positive or RH negative, that means that individual person is D positive or D negative. So among these, D is the most prevalent one and most immunogenic one. D is the most prevalent, means these are most common, and immunogenic one. Now, for example, this is our RBC. Okay, and actually these RH antigens are made up of peptides, proteins. So these have past membrane proteins. These are 12 past membrane proteins. Here they have NH2. These are 12 past membrane proteins. 12 past membrane proteins. They actually cross the membranes 12 times, and these are made up of peptides. And for example, here is the D antigen. Means these kind of persons who will have these RBCs with the D antigen, means they are able to make the antibodies against these RH antigens. These person will be the D positive, And as I already talked about it, that if the person is D positive, which means the person is Rh positive, as it is most prevalent. Now, these Rh blood group system have the peptides, means they have the proteins, okay? And in last video I have discussed about the ABO blood group system. In those systems, the antigens had the oligosaccharides. So these Rh antigens have peptides or proteins, you can say, while the ABO system had oligosaccharides or carbohydrates. This is the basic difference between the Rh blood group system and the ABO blood group system. This is about the Rh and this is about the ABO. Okay, so you should keep in mind about this. And as I have talked about, that among these antigens there could be the D antigen, which is most prevalent one. However, you can find C and E antigens also among these Rh positive persons, but the D one, RhD, is more prevalent or most common. Now, let's move further. Now, if we talk about the D antigen also have some variations in it. Now, what kind of variations I am talking about? For example, some people may be D positive, means they are Rh positive with D positive. Some people may have D negative. Some people have partial D. Some people may have weak D antigen, and some people could be Rh null. Now, what they mean? D positive persons, it means they have the D antigens on the RBCs. Okay, so this is the RBC, for example, and they have the D antigens. They have the D antigens along with them. Now, in D negative, simply D negative persons, they don't have D antigens over them. They don't have D antigens. Okay. Now, if we talk about the partial D, these kinds of persons have the D antigen, but very few in number. For example, if there are more D antigens along with them, so it will have only one for study purpose. Now, if we talk about the weak D, in weak D, it means there are D antigens but abnormally present, means they are not normal. They have the D antigen, but this is abnormal. Abnormal D antigen. Now, what about Rh null? Rh null means they don't have D antigen, and also neither they have C antigen nor they have E antigen. So they have nothing along with them. Here we could have C or E also. Here we could have C or E. In these two conditions also, we could have C antigen or E antigen. But in the case of RS null, neither we have D nor we have C or E. D, C, E, none of them is there. Okay. So these were some details about the D antigens. So now you must have heard about the terms like this person have the A positive blood group or this person have the B positive blood group. So what does they mean? What is the meaning of this, that positive, or if someone have A negative or B negative, AB negative or O negative? So what does they mean? Positive blood groups or negative blood groups? What their RBCs have on their surface? So let's talk about that. Now for example, this is the RBC of the person who have blood group A positive. So what antigens do they have? They will have A antigen. Along with that, as they are A positive, so they would have D antigen 2 on the surface of RBC. Now if the person is B positive, they will have B antigen on the surface of their RBC, and along with that they would have the D antigen 2 as they are B positive. And in the AB positive and O positive persons, again if you make the RBC, AB positive person, they will have A antigen. Along with that, they will have B antigen, and along with that, as they are AB positive, they would have D antigen 2 along with them on the surface of their RBCs. Now, if we talk about the O positive blood group, what will the condition? They won't have ABO antigens, means they don't have neither A nor B antigen. As they are positive, but they would have at least D antigen. Also, we don't have neither A is present nor B is present. So they have something. They have the H substance along with them, which I have talked about earlier in my previous video. So these were the positive blood group persons. And if we talk about the negative, A negative, B negative, AB negative and O negative persons. If we compare these persons with the positive blood groups, okay, these are our RBCs. Now same, they have the A antigen. Here also we have the B antigen. In case of AB, we have both the antigens, A as well as B antigen on the surface of the RBCs. And O, we don't have any antigen, but we have the H substance, or you can say H antigen. But as these persons are negative, it means they don't have these D antigens along with them on the surface of the RBCs. So there you can say they are nude. So these persons are Rh positives and these persons would be Rh negative. So this is the difference between the persons who are Rh positive or Rh negative. Now let's move further and now let's talk about the antibodies, that what kind of antibodies do they have. We will compare about the Rh system and the ABO system. So we talked about the antigens, but we didn't talk about the antibodies. So let's talk about the antibodies, that what kind of antibodies do they have as far as Rh antigen is Rh blood group system is concerned and ABO blood group system is concerned. So let's compare about them. Actually, the Rh blood group system, as they have peptides, as I already mentioned over here, as Rh blood group system have peptides and ABO blood group system has oligosaccharides or carbohydrates, you can say. So these Rh blood group system now, as they are peptides, so in our immune system, T helper cells would be able to recognize these peptides. So initially there would be the production of the IgM antibodies. There would be the production of IgM antibodies. But as time passes by, IgG antibodies would be higher in number as far as Rh antigens are concerned. And if we talk about the ABO, they have more IgM antibodies. Now, why they have the IgM antibodies, not IgG antibodies? However, IgG antibodies could be present in those persons who have the blood group O. So this is small exception. Otherwise, ABO blood group system have the IgM antibodies. Why is it so? The reason is that as ABO system are oligosaccharides, these antigens have oligosaccharides. So our immune system have T helper cells, as you all know. So T helper cells would not be able to recognize those oligosaccharides. They are able to recognize the peptides as Rh blood group system have the peptides. So it actually gradually they would form the IgG antibodies. IgG antibodies, but as they don't have peptides, T helper cells would not be able to recognize it. So there would be the production of IgM antibodies rather than IgG antibodies. Okay. Now if we talk about the Rh negative person, for example, we take the example of any pregnant lady who is Rh negative and she is having a baby who is Rh positive. So in what cases Rh negative mothers could start making the antibodies against these Rh antigens? Actually, there are two conditions. Either this lady is transfused with the blood which was Rh positive. So if they are transfused with the blood which was Rh positive, so Rh negative mother could start making those antibodies against the Rh antigens. Or the second condition is, if the lady have the baby who is having Rh positive blood, or unfortunately if there is some feto-maternal hemorrhage, so what will it cause? That the blood from the fetus comes into the blood of the mother and mix with it. And what will it do? Initially, it will cause the starting of the production of antibodies against these Rh antigens, and will cause the complication which is called as erythroblastosis fetalis. However, in the first baby, it doesn't cause much effect, but in the second baby of this mother, there could have some severe complications, like the baby would have severe anemia and severe jaundice. Now, after this, what kind of dangers could the baby have if there would be the erythroblastosis fetalis, or there would be the production of antibodies against these Rh antigens in the blood of the mother? Now, if there is Rh blood group, first of all they have the IgG antibodies, and they have IgM antibodies. The reason I have discussed. And these IgG antibodies, they can cross the placenta. They do cross the placenta actually. And they don't cross the placenta usually. They don't cross placenta. Okay. So as they can cause the crossing of the placenta, these rhesus blood group is more danger. Rh is more danger. Now, if they will penetrate the placental barrier, they would mix into the blood of the baby, and there it can cause extravascular hemolysis. Now, what is extravascular hemolysis? If we talk about the ABO blood group system, however, IgM antibodies, they don't cross the placenta, but if they do cross the placenta, there won't be much effect as compared to the Rh system. Why? As Rh antigens are more stick to the RBCs only. So the Rh antigens are more stick to RBCs only. Whereas if we talk about the ABO system, they are present on RBCs as well as other tissues too. So these antibodies, when they will enter into the fetus blood, they would get diluted. Whereas these IgG antibodies, if they do cross the placenta, first of all, they do cross the placenta, so there will be much more antibodies, and they will focus on the RBCs of the fetus blood, because as Rh antigens are more triggered to the RBCs, whereas in this case, AB blood groups, they are present in other tissues too, and usually they don't cross placenta, and if they do, there will be the much amount of IgM antibody as compared to the rhesus blood group system. So these would get diluted into the blood and won't cause much effect. Now, these Rh antigen, these rhesus blood group system IgG antibodies cause extravascular hemolysis. And if we talk about the ABO blood group system, they cause the intravascular hemolysis. Now let's talk about this, that what is extravascular hemolysis and what is intravascular hemolysis. Now, if we talk about the ABO blood group system, these ones, as they have IgM antibodies, okay, they are able to activate the complement system. and whereas IgG antibodies are not able to activate the complement system. Now, as the complement system would activate, so through that cascade, it would be able to make the holes in the RBC's membranes, through which the RBC would start to leak out the hemoglobin. Will start to leak out the hemoglobin from the RBC, and as you all know, as hemoglobin is present in our RBCs, they are not dangerous. But if hemoglobin would come out of the RBCs, it would be toxic in our body. It would be toxic to our body and can cause sepsis. Now, this is the intravascular, because the RBCs are leaking out the hemoglobin into the blood circulation directly. So that's why it's the intravascular hemolysis. Now, if we talk about the extravascular hemolysis, our spleen, liver, and bone marrow, as you all know, they have the macrophages, where these RBCs gets destroyed after the completion of their lifespan. Now, as these RBCs would go to the spleen, what they will do? Now, if there is the RBC, for example, there is the, for example, this is the fetus RBC. Okay, this is the fetus RBC. Now, if we talk about the RH, rhesus blood group, RH blood group, the antibodies would start to cover up these RBCs, but they won't cause any hemolysis over there. As these RBCs would present to the spleen, there they would face the macrophages. Over there, the macrophages would bind these antibodies and will hold these RBCs, because macrophage will bind over here to these antibodies, and RBCs would not be able to free up over there. So macrophage would engulf these RBCs, and because these RBCs are destroying not inside the blood circulation, they are destroying inside the spleen, they are destroying with the help of macrophage. That's why it is extravascular hemolysis. So that is the difference between the intravascular hemolysis and extravascular hemolysis. Also, after the destruction of these RBCs, they would release the bilirubin into the blood circulation. That's why these babies have jaundice and anemia due to the lack of red blood cells. So now let's sum up the RH blood group system, and let's sum up the comparison between these. First of all, the rhesus, the RH blood group system, they have the peptides or proteins, and they have the oligosaccharides or carbohydrates. Second, these antigens are less spontaneous, or they are not naturally present, and they are more spontaneous, and they are more naturally present. Less naturally present, because if RH positive blood will be injected into the RH negative person, the person would gradually start to make the antibodies against it, and within weeks it would be susceptible to the RH positive antigen. Whereas in ABO system, it would react directly and more quickly as compared to the rhesus one. That's why they are less spontaneous and less naturally present, and they are more spontaneous, more naturally present. Third one, that those, as I have already mentioned, that in RH blood group system, the antigens are more localized on the RBC surface, and in this case, the antigen present to RBCs as well as other tissues too. Okay. Now, if we talk about the antibodies, these RH blood group system have the IgG antibodies and our ABO blood group system have the IgM antibodies. Okay, they do cross the placenta. IgG antibodies, they do cross the placenta, and these ABO blood group system, they IgM antibodies, they don't cross the placenta, but if they do, they won't cause much effect as compared to rhesus blood group. Now, they cause the extravascular hemolysis as far as RH blood group system is concerned, and ABO blood group system causes the intravascular hemolysis, as I have already explained this. So this was all about the RH blood group system. Hope you like this video. Thanks for watching.